What if the most powerful form of revenge is saying nothing at all? I want you to imagine this. You're sitting in a meeting, at a family dinner, or in a quiet conversation. Everything feels calm. And then, suddenly, someone, through a glance, a half-joke, or a subtle remark, makes you feel small. Maybe they point out a weakness, remind you of a past mistake, or simply try to appear superior. Have you ever experienced that? I believe you have. Because, as I often tell those I work with, especially those in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, disrespect is rarely accidental. It's a tactic, a test. They want to see your reaction. They want to see you lose control. Because the moment you react, you've handed over your power. But what happens if you don't? What if you just look at them, with a calm gaze? No anger. No comeback. No need to explain. Do you know what happens? They begin to falter. They grow uneasy, because your silence isn't empty. It's a mirror, reflecting their own insecurity right back at them. Silence is the strongest response you can choose. It forces others to face themselves, to confront the shadow they were trying to mask by diminishing you. I once heard a beautiful quote: when you don't react, others are forced to reflect. And that, my friend, is the power of stillness. It's not surrender, it's strategy. Protect your dignity, not your ego. When you don't retaliate, you are safeguarding your inner peace from the chaos of others. There's a subtle but profound difference between ego and dignity. The ego wants to fight back, to retaliate, to speak out and demand justice. Dignity, on the other hand, chooses silence. It rises above the noise, beyond the reach of petty provocations. You see, there are moments when silence is not weakness, but a powerful reflection of a mature soul. The wise do not argue with those who provoke for the sake of provocation. They understand that the more you react, the more you surrender your inner command. And when you lose that, you let someone else drive your emotional state. The ego whispers, you must prove them wrong. You must defend your name. You can't let them win. But dignity calmly responds, I don't need that to feel my worth. When someone offends you, it's the ego that flinches first, but when you choose not to retaliate, what you are really protecting is the serenity of your mind. I've seen people spend their entire lives defending their ego, arguing over every word, retaliating against every slight. They live in a state of constant fatigue, forever handing over their emotional control to others. In contrast, I've also met quiet individuals, unimpressed by conflict, untouched by insults, who carry within them a remarkable stillness, an unshakable grace. Silence is not always weakness. Many choose silence because they know, if they speak, they lower themselves to the same level as those trying to drag them down. And that is something they will never permit. Your silence may make others uncomfortable. They will try harder, mock, provoke, stir you up, hoping to pull you into the emotional battleground they've prepared. But if you refuse to enter that battlefield, you've already won. You've kept your dignity. You've stayed true to yourself. Silence isn't avoidance. It is a wordless declaration, I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. And I will not waste time proving it to those who don't matter. We cannot control how others behave toward us, but we can always choose how we respond. And sometimes, not responding is the most powerful response of all. It is a response filled with grace, with wisdom, with self-respect. Don't let your ego rush you into battles you don't need to fight. Let your dignity remind you, you are already beyond that. Reaction is the energy they crave. Offenders are often weak and seek to control you through emotional manipulation. Don't give them that power. In every relationship, be it friendship, family, or work, there are moments when we're backed into a corner. A careless remark, a disdainful glance, or a loaded question meant to insult. Our instinctive reaction is often to feel hurt, to get angry, or to strike back immediately. But here's what most people don't realize: the very moment you react, you are handing over your power to someone else. In behavioral psychology, there's a term called emotional hijacking. It describes a state where your emotional brain, especially the amygdala, overrides your rational thinking. When someone says something that triggers you, they are intentionally pushing buttons to let your emotions drown out your clarity. And if you react from that emotional surge, you are no longer in control. You've been hijacked, steered by feelings someone else set in motion. People who routinely insult others don't do so out of strength. They do it because they feel powerless in their own lives. So they reach for control where they can, by trying to dominate your emotional response. They don't need to win an argument. All they need is your reaction. Because even negative attention feeds their sense of influence. I still matter to you. If you get angry, they know they've hit a nerve. If you lash back, they know they've pulled you into their game. But if you remain calm, speak slowly, or walk away in silence, you've just unraveled their entire plan. Reaction is energy. And energy, like money, should be spent wisely. You wouldn't hand cash to someone who disrespected you, so why offer them access to your attention, your emotions, your inner peace? The Stoic understands this deeply. Not every insult deserves a response. The loudest voice is not always the wisest. And silence is not surrender. Sometimes, not reacting is your greatest act of power, the conscious choice to protect your mind's sanctuary. Think back to a time when you reacted emotionally and regretted it. That swept away feeling. Those words you shouldn't have said. Those actions you wish you hadn't taken, it all stemmed from letting someone else temporarily borrow your emotional steering wheel. But you can take it back. With a pause, a breath, a decision not to respond. Non-reaction doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Because you're no longer governed by others. Their words, their judgments, their actions, they no longer dictate your mood, your peace. Don't give others dominion over your emotions just because they know how to light the fuse. Let them see, you've grown. You're grounded. And you're no longer someone who can be shaken by a few cheap provocations. Silence is a strategy, not surrender. Not speaking doesn't mean you don't see, it simply means the matter isn't worth your dignity. There's a common misconception I've heard echoed time and time again in quiet conversations: if I stay silent, they'll think I'm weak. But the truth is, only those who haven't tasted the depth of maturity confuse silence with submission. The wise don't remain silent because they have nothing to say. They choose silence because they've learned, some things are simply not worth disturbing their inner peace. In Stoic philosophy, silence isn't merely an emotional state, it's a strategy, a conscious way of life. It is the intentional choice to decide what deserves your response, and what does not deserve your energy. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult deserves an answer. Every time you choose silence, you reclaim your power. Imagine someone tries to provoke you, with sarcasm, contempt, or a bitter tone. Every gesture, every word, is an invitation into the emotional arena. But you don't step in. You simply look at them, calm, grounded. No retaliation, no defense, no surrender. And that, right there, disarms them. Because you didn't engage, their game loses meaning. That kind of silence is not easy to maintain. It demands patience, not to react instantly. It requires perception, to see the motive behind the behavior. Most of all, it calls for deep self-confidence, to know your worth isn't proven through reaction, but through your ability to preserve your character amidst provocation. I've seen people who respond to every negative word like they're under siege, thinking they're defending themselves. But in truth, they lose fragments of peace with every provocation. Meanwhile, those who choose silence wield a rare kind of power, the power of intention, the power of being untouched. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you are strong enough not to be dragged down. It's an unspoken declaration: I know who I am. I don't need to prove it in every exchange. And when you live with that belief, you become untouchable. There's a quote I love: still waters run deep. Steady minds have no need for noise. Full hearts feel no need to explain. And that very stillness commands respect. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: silence is a deliberate choice. It is the strategy of the strong. It is the expression of deep inner power, spoken not with words, but through unwavering presence. Choose the silent path to grow. When you focus on your goals, your craft, and self-mastery, you become untouchable. Spend enough time observing those who are truly successful, not the loud ones chasing applause, but those who live with depth and clarity, and you'll notice a pattern: they never waste their energy on things that don't serve their long-term purpose. They understand that focus is the most precious asset, and silence is the shield that protects it from the noise of distraction. There's something remarkable I often see in people who've walked through fire: they seem harder to shake. Not because they've lost their emotions, but because they've learned to discern what deserves a reaction, and what deserves to be released to them. Silence is not emptiness, it is a sacred space where clarity and wisdom are cultivated. The silent path is not a lonely one, it is a path of discernment. You are not withdrawing from people, you're simply refusing to let the trivial enter the operating system of your inner world. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to fight every false opinion. You just keep walking, quietly, steadily, and let the life you build in silence speak louder than any defense ever could. When you devote your time to personal growth, learning a new skill, strengthening your body, nourishing your soul, you are redirecting your attention from noise to value. That is how you become untouchable. Not because you no longer feel, but because you now live with purpose, and in a life guided by meaning. No outside criticism can truly derail you. I once asked a successful entrepreneur, "How do you stay unaffected by criticism?" He smiled and said, "I'm too busy. I'm building something bigger than those words." That answer struck me like a wake-up call, a reminder of how much time we lose reacting to what doesn't matter. Silence, when used wisely, becomes the perfect environment to restructure your life. It helps you see who is loud because they're idle, and who is quiet because they're building. And when you choose the silent path to grow, you'll notice something powerful. It's often your lack of reaction that makes the biggest statement. You don't need to announce that you're evolving. Just keep going. In time, your peace, your growth, and your transformation will speak for you. Loudly, clearly, powerfully. They'll say one thing: you've risen far above what once tried to wound you. Karma is silent justice, let it unfold without you watching. You don't need to witness their downfall, just keep moving forward. There's a common belief that justice only feels real when we see the wrongdoer face consequences. When the person who disrespected you is exposed, when they fail, when someone stands up for you. But in the spirit of Stoicism, and through years of walking beside people who have grown through adversity, I've learned one truth: justice needs no audience. And karma doesn't need your validation to work. Karma is the quiet law of balance woven into the fabric of the universe. It doesn't need you to monitor it. It doesn't require your involvement. And above all, it doesn't demand that you cling to bitterness as fuel for retribution. When you choose silence, you're not giving up, you're stepping out of the chaos and allowing life to correct itself in its own time. Slowly, subtly, but with unmistakable fairness. I know, it's hard to walk away without looking back, without waiting for an apology, without hoping to see those who hurt you struggle. But trust me, every time you choose not to turn around, every time you choose silence and keep walking, you send a powerful message to the universe. I've learned what I needed to learn. I'm ready for what's next. I've witnessed it time and time again. People who chose not to argue, not to seek revenge, not to demand validation. Instead, they focused on healing, on rebuilding, on pouring their energy into what truly matters. And eventually, quietly, inevitably, those who once hurt them faced their own reckoning. Not because they were punished, but because truth has a way of catching up. In this sense, silence isn't passive, it's an act of faith. It's trusting that the natural laws don't require your interference. You don't need to count every stumble they take. You don't need to be present when karma arrives. You just need to live with integrity. Do what's right. And remember, every action plants a seed. Time will take care of the harvest. When you release the desire to see someone pay, you set yourself free. Because your peace no longer depends on someone else's downfall. You rise, not through their collapse, but through your own strength, character, and creation. And that is the quiet power of karma Stoicism. It's not about waiting for justice. It's about becoming living proof that justice, real, enduring, silent, always finds its way. Serenity is the ultimate revenge, not in anger, but in quiet success that forces others to reflect on themselves. Not every explosion is strength, and not every silence is weakness. There is a form of retaliation that requires no words, no arguments, yet still makes the person who once offended you pause and reflect. That is serenity. When you don't get angry, when you don't rush to react, but instead continue to live well, live deeply, live with grace, you are doing the very thing they never expected. You turn your existence into a mirror that reflects their flaws and pettiness back at them. And that, more than any words of reproach you could utter, strikes deeper than any criticism. Quiet, unassuming success is the most refined form of retribution one can give to a painful past. You don't mention them. You don't blame them. You leave no trace of anger or resentment, but you do not forget. You simply choose not to allow them to occupy space in your mind anymore. And that absence, for them, is the most powerful presence they will ever encounter. Your serenity is a statement. It says, I've walked through the pain, but I will not let it define me. It is a living proof that you don't need to strike back to prove your worth, because your growth and character are the answers in themselves. Sometimes, the greatest revenge doesn't lie in making someone pay, it lies in not needing them to. You just need to keep moving forward, keep growing, and keep living the life you choose. A life undisturbed by petty words, untouched by those no longer worthy of your attention. And then, one day, when they look back, they will see the distance. Not just the gap in success or peace, but the distance in mindset. They remain stuck, still burdened by unresolved pains, while you have moved on, in silence, and with presence. Silence erases their importance. No reply, no reaction, no place in your mind is what hurts them most. Silence is the quiet removal of someone's right to exist in your inner world. It is a decisive, calm act, but one that speaks louder than any outburst. I've moved on. I've closed that chapter. When you stop texting, stop responding, stop allowing them to live rent-free in your thoughts, you are sending a profound message, not through words, but through stillness. You no longer belong here. For someone who once disrespected you, indifference is more disarming than anger. They may come prepared for a fight, ready for a battle of words, a clash of egos, but they're powerless in the face of your silence. Your refusal to engage becomes a mirror, reflecting back the emptiness of their actions. They assumed they'd live forever in your mind, but you've chosen to let go. I've witnessed people who were hurt, betrayed, belittled, but instead of reacting, they simply walked forward. No blame, no retaliation. And do you know what happened? The one who inflicted pain began to feel lost. They expected anger, some reaction to prove they still mattered, but silence took that from them. And in that emptiness, they realized they had been erased completely. In the Stoic spirit, silence isn't just about withholding words. It's about choosing a life that looks forward. It's about giving your energy only to what's worthy people, worthy paths, a worthy future. When you let someone go in silence, you don't create drama. You create distance, a distance they can no longer reach. And that is what haunts them most. Turn insults into fuel for growth. Let hurtful words become the stepping stones to a greater you. There's something fascinating I've observed over years of working with mature souls, those who've been deeply wounded, insulted, cast aside. These very people often rise the highest, not because they were luckier than others, but because they chose to turn their pain into power. Every time someone hurls an insult at you, you face a choice. Let their words sink into your heart and discourage you, or use them as fuel to rise. The Stoic, the one who understands the strength within, will always choose the latter. You're not here to chase down every sharp word or prove yourself in every battle. You're here to show, through your actions, that you can go further, grow stronger, and become the best version of yourself, without ever striking back. Every insult, if you know how to use it, becomes a step, a launch pad, a new beginning. Think back to the moments you were underestimated. Didn't they often awaken something fierce inside you? When others didn't believe in you, you had to learn how to believe in yourself. When they denied your worth, you were forced to look inward and rebuild from the roots. We cannot control what others say, but we can always choose what we do with it. You can let their words dry you out, or let them water the soil of your inner world, so something new can grow. If today you're hurting from someone's cruel words, pause and ask yourself, I will not answer with words, I will answer with results. Let your life be the reply. Let the steadiness in how you live become your silent, powerful response. The Stoic does not argue to prove a point. They prove it by how they live, by the depth of their calm, by each quiet step forward. And that is the most profound response of all. It turns every insult into something small, something forgotten, and it turns you into someone unshakable. If you're still listening at this point, I believe something within you is quietly yearning, not loud, but sincere. A yearning to rediscover a place of inner stillness amidst a world full of noise, pressure, temptations, and the constant friction that adult life brings. And I want you to know something important: you're not alone. And you're not lost. There's something almost sacred that happens when we move beyond the restless years of our youth. When victories and defeats on the surface no longer excite us. When praise, recognition, even criticism, gradually lose their grip. We begin to see what truly matters: the stillness within. The ability to live without being pulled by every wave of emotion. Every day, millions of people, like you and like me, are learning to slow down, learning to observe instead of react, learning to take a step back, not because they're weak, but because they've matured beyond the need to always win. They choose not to react, not out of fear, but because they understand. To hold back a reaction is a form of power. And that power, when preserved, becomes profound freedom. I've seen people who seemed unshakable, wealthy, influential, respected, but just one look of contempt, one sarcastic remark, and they unravel, losing sleep, acting out of alignment with their values. And I've seen others, seemingly ordinary, who carry a noble stillness. They don't lash out. They don't need revenge, because they've built a fortress within themselves, one no one can breach. That is what I hope you move toward. I don't expect you to change your life overnight after watching this. No one becomes someone else in a day. But I invite you to begin, to start with the small things. One moment of silence when misunderstood. One smile when you could have argued. One step away from a meaningless fight you know isn't worth your peace. These small moments, gathered over time, become the armor of your inner world. Peace is not the absence of chaos. Peace is no longer needing everything around you to be calm. It comes from within, from steadiness forged through time, wisdom, and mindful choices in each present moment. And when you live from that space, you'll notice, the things that once triggered your anger, your insecurity, your worry, begin to lose their power, because you're no longer living on that level. You've risen, and stillness has become more than a state, it has become your way of being. If something I shared today resonates with you, leave a comment. I choose peace. Nothing more. No need for explanation. Just one simple sentence, to remind yourself, and to let me know you're here, walking this path with me. And if you feel ready to go further, to cultivate calm, stoic thinking, and unshakable inner strength, hit subscribe. I'll be here each week, not to lecture, but to sit beside you, to reflect, explore, and go deeper into the art of living quietly in a noisy world. Thank you for listening, not just to me, but to yourself. And remember, you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. The calmest presence is often the one that makes everyone else fall silent. I'll see you in the next video, where we continue learning to master the mind, master our emotions, and most of all, master ourselves. Live with calm, and let your peace speak for you.